The void of space erupted in brilliant flashes as another world died. Captain Hanwoo gripped the armrest of his command chair, his knuckles white as he watched the planet Korath being torn apart, piece by piece. The world that had housed millions of innocent beings just hours ago was now nothing more than floating debris and cosmic dust. "Dear God," whispered Navigator Lee Soo from her station, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. "They're stripping it down to the core." The alien machines moved like a swarm of metallic locusts across the planet's surface. Each ship was the size of a city block, their dark hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. They worked with mechanical precision, their massive extraction beams carving through continents like hot knives through butter. Mountains crumbled, oceans boiled away, and entire cities vanished in seconds. Han Wu had seen many things in his 15 years as an exploration captain, but nothing had prepared him for this. The creatures they called the Devourers didn't just destroy worlds, they consumed them completely, leaving nothing behind but empty space where thriving civilizations once stood. "Sir, we're receiving distress signals from 17 sectors," reported Lieutenant Park Min, her fingers dancing across the communications console with desperate urgency. The young woman's face was pale as sweat beaded on her forehead. She had been monitoring the emergency channels for 3 straight days, and the constant stream of death and destruction was taking its toll on everyone aboard. The bridge fell silent, except for the crackling static of dying worlds. Each transmission told the same horrifying story. Entire star systems going dark, billions of lives snuffed out in minutes, advanced civilizations that had stood for thousands of years reduced to cosmic waste. "Play the last transmission from Korath," Hanwoo ordered, though he dreaded hearing it. Park Min's hands trembled as she activated the recording. A desperate alien voice filled the bridge, speaking in the universal trade language. "This is Governor Zell of Korath Prime. The machines are in our atmosphere. Our defense grid is failing. They're adapting to our weapons faster than we can fire them. If anyone receives this message, don't come here. Save yourselves. Save your worlds. They cannot be stopped. They cannot be reasoned." The transmission cut to static. The Devourers had appeared 6 months ago at the galaxy's edge, emerging from the dark space between star systems like a nightmare given form. No one knew where they came from or why they had chosen now to begin their rampage of destruction. Some theorists believed they were machines left behind by an ancient civilization. Others thought they might be a weapon created by some unknown enemy. But their purpose was crystal clear: consume everything. They moved like a plague across star systems, their black ships adapting to every weapon fired at them, every defense raised against them. Energy shields that had protected worlds for centuries became useless within hours of first contact. Plasma cannons that could crack moons were absorbed and redirected back at their own ships. Even nuclear weapons seemed to only make them stronger. "Captain, the Altarian fleet just went dark," announced Chief Engineer Kim Tae, his voice tight with controlled fear. His usual calm demeanor was cracking as he monitored the long-range sensors. "That's the 3rd major civilization this week." The news hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. The Altarians were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their technology was centuries ahead of most other races, and their military was considered nearly invincible. If they couldn't stop the Devourers, what hope did anyone else have? Han Wu watched the tactical display as red zones spread across the galactic map like an infection. Each red dot represented a dead world, an extinct species, a civilization that would never again look up at the stars with wonder and hope. The pattern was becoming clear. The Devourers were moving in a spiral toward the galaxy's center, consuming everything in their path. "How many ships did they have?" asked Dr. Yoon-ji, the ship's chief science officer. She had been studying the enemy's movement patterns for weeks, trying to find some weakness or predictable behavior. "Over 10,000 vessels," Kim Tae replied, grimly. "They didn't stand a chance. The Devourers just swarmed them and adapted to their weapons in real time. It was like watching ants try to fight a forest fire." Han Wu clenched his jaw and stood up from his command chair. The Iron Dawn was a small exploration ship with a crew of 200, tasked with mapping uncharted regions and making first contact with new species. They weren't warriors or soldiers. They were scientists, engineers, and explorers who had stumbled into humanity's first contact with an extinction-level threat. The irony wasn't lost on him. For decades, humanity had dreamed of making contact with alien civilizations. They had imagined peaceful exchanges of knowledge, cultural sharing, and joining a galactic community. Instead, their first real contact was with a force of pure destruction that threatened to wipe out every thinking being in the galaxy. "Sir, should we launch a probe to gather more data?" suggested Park Min, though her voice lacked conviction. "No," Han Wu said firmly. "We've seen enough. Every ship that gets too close becomes their next meal. We need to get this information back to Earth before it's too late." He turned to face his crew, seeing his own fears reflected in their eyes. These people had followed him to the edge of known space, trusting in his leadership and experience. Now he had to make decisions that could determine the fate of not just their ship, but their entire species. "Set course for the rendezvous point," Han Wu ordered. "We need to rejoin the human fleet and report what we've seen." But even as he gave the order, watching his crew spring into action with the efficiency born of long practice, he knew it might already be too late. The Devourers were learning with each world they consumed, adapting and growing stronger. And, now like an unstoppable tide of darkness, they were heading toward the core systems, toward Earth. 3 days later, the Iron Dawn dropped out of hyperspace and straight into hell. The moment the ship's sensors came online, alarms began screaming throughout the bridge. Captain Han Wu's blood ran cold as he took in the scene before them. Sweet mother of... Navigator Li Su couldn't finish her sentence as she stared at the tactical display in horror. The combined galactic fleet was dying. Ships from dozens of different species, vessels that had taken centuries to build and represented the pinnacle of their civilization's technology, were being torn apart like paper in a hurricane. The massive Zentorian dreadnoughts, each one, the size of a small city and armed with weapons that could crack planets, were burning wrecks drifting through space. Their brilliant blue hulls, once symbols of hope and protection, now glowed red with internal fires. "How many ships are we looking at?" Han Wu asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "The sensors are picking up debris from..." "At least 3,000 vessels," reported Chief Engineer Kim Tae, his voice hollow with shock. "Sir, that's not just a fleet. That's an entire galactic armada." The retreating ships fired desperately at their pursuers as they fled, their energy beams and missile barrages lighting up the darkness like a deadly fireworks display. But for every shot they fired, the Devourer ships seemed to grow stronger. Their dark hulls absorbed the energy and redirected it back at their attackers with twice the force. "My God," whispered Li Su, pointing at the main screen. "Look at those things." The Devourer ships were unlike anything in known space. Where most spacecraft were built with clean lines and geometric shapes, these vessels looked almost alive. Their hulls seemed to pulse and breathe, constantly shifting and flowing like liquid metal. Some were long and serpentine, twisting through space like cosmic snakes. Others were round and bulbous, covered in what looked like organic growths and tentacle-like appendages. "They're beautiful," Dr. Yunji said quietly, then immediately looked ashamed of the comment. "I mean in a terrifying way. It's like they're not built, but grown." As they watched, one of the smaller Devourer ships suddenly split in half, becoming 2 identical vessels that immediately began attacking different targets. Another ship extended what looked like feeding tubes toward a damaged Altarian cruiser, and within seconds, the alien vessel was being drained of all its energy and resources. "They're not just destroying the fleet," observed Communications Officer Choi Da, her face pale as she monitored the enemy transmissions. "They're learning from every ship they encounter, every weapon system, every defense grid, every tactical maneuver. They're absorbing it all." The scope of the battle was overwhelming. Ships the size of skyscrapers were being swatted aside like insects. The famous Kelvarian battlecruisers, known throughout the galaxy for their impenetrable shields, were being cut apart by weapons that seemed to phase right through their defenses. Even the mysterious ethereal ships, made of pure energy and thought to be indestructible, were flickering and dying one by one. "Captain, I'm detecting human ships in Sector 7, Kim Tae reported, his fingers flying over his control panel. "It looks like Admiral Chen's task force. They're trying to form a defensive line with what's left of the Terran fleet." Hansu could see them on the tactical display, the familiar wedge shapes of human destroyers and cruisers. They looked so small compared to the alien vessels around them, but they were fighting with typical human stubbornness, refusing to give. Ground even as their more advanced allies fled in panic. Communications Officer Choi Da was frantically trying to raise the human fleet, her hands dancing across her console as she cycled through every available frequency. "This is the Iron Dawn calling Admiral Chen. Please respond. Admiral Chen, do you copy?" The only response was static, filled with the electronic screams of dying ships. Suddenly, the Iron Dawn shuddered violently, throwing everyone forward in their seats. Sparks flew from damaged control panels as the lights flickered and dimmed. "We're taking fire," Choidar shouted over the sound of groaning metal. "Devourer scouts have locked onto us." On the main screen, Hanwoo could see 3 sleek enemy vessels peeling away from the main swarm like predators who had spotted easy prey. Each ship was about the size of the Iron Dawn, but they moved with fluid grace that made them look more like swimming dolphins than spacecraft. Their weapons were already charging, adapting their energy signatures to match those of the retreating fleet's guns. "Evasive maneuvers," Han Wu ordered, gripping his command chair as the ship banked hard to starboard. Li Su's hands flew over. Her navigation controls, sending the Iron Dawn into a spiraling dive that would have made a fighter pilot proud. But the Devourer ships matched their every move, staying locked onto them like guided missiles. "Their targeting systems are incredible," Kim Tae reported, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched the enemies approach. "They're predicting our flight path before we even make course corrections." In the distance, Han Wu could see the human ships retreating with the others, following the same predictable tactical patterns that had failed every other species. They were fighting bravely, but they were fighting like everyone else. And everyone else was losing. "Sir, we can't reach the fleet," reported Kim Tae, frustration clear in his voice. "The Devourers are jamming all standard communication frequencies. It's like they're not just blocking our signals, they're learning from them and using that knowledge against us." A brilliant explosion suddenly lit up the viewport, brighter than a small sun. One of the massive Zentorian dreadnoughts had just died, its reactor core breaching in a spectacular fireball that could be seen from light years away. The shockwave reached them seconds later, rattling the Iron Dawn's hull like thunder. "That was the flagship Eternal Victory," Dr. Yoon-ji said quietly, reading the energy signature from her sensors. 5 million souls just died in an instant. The 3 Devourer scouts were closing fast, their alien weapons beginning to glow with deadly energy. In seconds, the Iron Dawn would join the growing field of debris that had once been the galaxy's greatest fleet. That's when Han Wu made a decision. That would change everything. "Cut engines," he ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "Sir?" Park Min looked at him in shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You heard me. Full stop. Kill all running lights and power down non-essential systems." "Captain, with respect, that's suicide," Kim Tae protested. "If we stop moving, we're a sitting duck." "Trust me," Han Wu said firmly. "Do it now." The crew exchanged uncertain glances but followed orders. The Iron Dawn's engines went silent, its lights went dark, and suddenly the small human ship was just another piece of debris floating in the vast graveyard of the Galactic Fleet. The 3 Devourer scouts swept past them, their sensors apparently dismissing the powerless vessel as wreckage not worth their attention. Han Fu held his breath as the alien ships continued their pursuit of more active targets, their organic hulls pulsing with predatory hunger. In the silence that followed, broken only by the distant explosions of dying ships, Han Hu turned to face his crew. Every eye on the bridge was focused on him, waiting for an explanation. "We're not running," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that could doom them all or save the galaxy. "We're going to study these things and find a way to stop them." For the next week, the Iron Dawn became a ghost ship, drifting through the graveyard of destroyed fleets, like a predator hunting in the shadows. Captain Hanwoo had ordered complete radio silence and minimal power usage, making them nearly invisible to the Devourer sensors that swept the area constantly, searching for survivors to eliminate. The crew worked in shifts, using the ship's mining equipment and long-range sensor arrays to observe their enemies from a safe distance. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. They're like a machine intelligence, but organic at the same time, Dr. Yunji explained during one of their daily briefings in the darkened conference room. Her xenobiology background made her the perfect person to study these alien creatures. Watch this recording from yesterday. On the main screen, they watched a lone devourer ship encounter the wreckage of a Kelvarian battlecruiser. The alien vessel extended dozens of tentacle-like appendages that began probing the debris, scanning every piece of technology they could find. Within minutes, the devourer ship's hull began to shift and change, incorporating new weapon systems and defensive measures based on what it had learned. They're completely logical, Dr. Yunji continued, her voice filled with scientific wonder despite the horrific implications. Every adaptation follows predictable parameters. They encounter a threat, analyze it, and develop a countermeasure within hours. It's like they're running some kind of advanced computer program. Communications Officer Choi Da nodded grimly. I've been monitoring their transmissions. They don't communicate like living beings. It's more like data packets being shared between network nodes. Each ship learns what every other ship learns instantly. Chief Engineer Kim Tae looked up from his workstation, his eyes bloodshot from days of continuous work. He had been laboring around the clock, jury-rigging their mining lasers into makeshift weapons and reinforcing their hull with spare parts. The problem is they're too good at adapting. I've watched the battle recordings from the fleet engagement. Every time someone fired energy weapons at them, they adjusted their shielding within seconds. Every time someone tried ramming attacks, they shifted their hull composition to absorb the impact. Navigator Lee Su pulled up a tactical display showing the movement patterns of the devourer swarm. They're methodical too. Look at this. They're not just randomly destroying things. They're systematically harvesting every piece of useful technology and raw material. Nothing goes to waste. Han Wu studied the data, his mind racing as he tried to find some weakness they could exploit. The devourers seemed unstoppable because they could adapt to any conventional attack within minutes. But there had to be something. What if we don't? Give them anything logical to adapt to, he said suddenly, the idea hitting him like lightning. The crew looked at him with confusion. Sir? Park Min asked. Think about it, Han Wu continued, standing up and pacing around the small room. They're like a computer program. They analyze threats and develop solutions. But what happens when you give a computer something it can't? Analyze? Something completely random and illogical? Dr. Yunji's eyes widened with understanding. You mean confuse their adaptation systems with unpredictable attacks? Exactly. Every military in the galaxy fights the same way. Energy weapons, projectiles, standard tactics. The Devourers have learned to counter all of that. But what if we attack them with something no military would ever think to use? The first opportunity to test Han Wu's theory came 3 days later. The Iron Dawn had been following a lone Devourer ship that was methodically strip mining an asteroid field, breaking down the rocky debris and absorbing the raw materials into its hull. The alien vessel was about twice their size, its dark surface covered in pulsing veins of energy. Remember, no energy weapons, Han Wu instructed his crew as they powered up their mining equipment. We're going to treat this like a construction job, not a battle. Instead of attacking with their jury-rigged laser weapons, Han Wu ordered something that had never been attempted in the history of space warfare. They began using their industrial tractor beams, designed for moving asteroids, and mining equipment, to grab chunks of rock and hurl them at the enemy vessel like a cosmic slingshot. The first asteroid, roughly the size of a city bus, slammed into the Devourer ship's hull with tremendous force. The alien vessel shuddered, but didn't seem particularly damaged. Its sensors began scanning the projectile, trying to analyze the threat. Hit it with another one, Han Wu ordered. Different size, different composition. Kim Tae grabbed a metallic asteroid rich in iron ore and launched it at a different angle. This one struck the enemy ship's weapon arrays, causing sparks and damage. The Devourer's adaptive systems began working furiously, trying to understand what kind of attack they were facing. Look at this, Dr. Yunji said excitedly, watching her sensor readings. Its adaptation protocols are cycling through different defensive configurations. It can't figure out what we're doing because there's no logical pattern to analyze. Lee Su launched a third asteroid, this one made of ice and frozen gases. When it hit the superheated hull of the enemy ship, it created a massive cloud of steam. That confused their targeting systems even further. The Devourer ship tried to return fire with its energy weapons, but the Iron Dawn was no longer where its sensors expected them to be. Instead of following standard evasive patterns, Li Su was flying the ship like she was playing a video game, looping and spinning in ways that made no tactical sense but kept them unpredictable. "Their targeting computer is having a breakdown," Choi Da reported with glee. "It keeps trying to predict our next move, but we're not following any logical flight pattern." The final blow came when Kim Tae grabbed the largest asteroid in the field, a chunk of rock and metal the size of a small moon, and hurled it directly at the confused enemy vessel. The Devourer ship, still trying to adapt to a threat it couldn't understand, was caught completely off guard. The massive projectile crushed its hull like an eggshell, and the alien vessel died in a brilliant explosion of green fire. "It worked," breathed Park Min in amazement, staring at the expanding debris field where their enemy had been. Because it was completely illogical, Han Wu realized, a smile spreading across his face for the first time in weeks. Their hive mind can't predict what it's never encountered before. We just defeated a technologically superior enemy using construction equipment and flying rocks. Over the following days, the crew of the Iron Dawn developed increasingly bizarre and creative tactics. Dr. Yoon-ji suggested using their ship's waste recycling system to create makeshift chemical weapons. They began launching containers of processed sewage at enemy ships, which confused their sensors and corroded their hulls in ways they couldn't adapt to quickly enough. Li Su reprogrammed their navigation computers to fly in patterns that defied all military doctrine: figure eights, spirals, and random zigzags. That made no sense but kept them alive. "If I can't predict where we're going next," she explained, "then neither can they." The most successful experiment came when Kim Tae suggested using their food replicators as weapons. They began creating massive quantities of dessert items, cakes, pies, and puddings, and launching them at enemy ships using their cargo bay ejection systems. The sticky, sugary mess clogged the Devourer's sensors and weapon ports, giving the Iron Dawn precious seconds to escape or counterattack. "This is insane," Park Min said after they had successfully destroyed their fifth enemy ship, using a combination of frozen fish, cleaning supplies, and old maintenance equipment. "We're fighting the most advanced alien force in the galaxy with garbage and lunch." "That's exactly why it's working," Han Wu replied, watching another Devourer ship flee in confusion after being pelted with industrial lubricant and spare clothing. "Each attack is more successful than the last, because each attack is more insane than anything the Devourers have faced. We're not thinking like soldiers, we're thinking like humans." The breakthrough that would change the fate of the galaxy came by complete accident. The Iron Dawn was engaged in another hit-and-run attack against a small group of Devourer ships when Communications Officer Choi Da made a mistake that nearly got them all killed and ultimately saved everyone. She had been monitoring enemy transmissions while simultaneously trying to boost morale by playing some of her personal music collection through the ship's internal speakers. The crew had been living in constant fear for weeks, and the familiar sounds of home helped keep their spirits up during the darkest moments. "Incoming transmission from the Devourer patrol," Choi Da reported, her fingers dancing across her control panel. "They're using frequency 847.3 for coordination signals. What happened next was pure human error, the kind of simple mistake that happens when people are tired, stressed, and working 18-hour shifts." Instead of switching to the enemy monitoring channel, Choi Da accidentally patched her personal music playlist directly into the Devourer communication frequency. Suddenly, the bridge was filled with the upbeat sounds of a cheerful K-pop song, complete with electronic synthesizers and energetic vocals. The catchy melody seemed absurdly out of place in the middle of a space battle, and for a moment, everyone just stared at her in confusion. Sorry. Choi Da frantically tried to cut the feed, but it took her several seconds to figure out which button she had pressed wrong. During those few seconds, something extraordinary happened. On the tactical display, they watched as 3 enemy ships that had been pursuing them in perfect formation suddenly stopped moving. Not slowed down or changed course, they literally came to a complete halt in space, drifting like abandoned hulks. "Did you see that?" Dr. Yunji called out, pulling up the sensor data on her screen. Her voice was filled with excitement and disbelief. "Look at these readings. Their neural activity spiked to incredible levels and then crashed completely. Here it's like the music overloaded their processing systems." Captain Hanwoo stared at the readings, his mind racing. The three Devourer ships were still motionless, their usual coordinated movements replaced by confused, twitching motions. "Play it again," he ordered. "Sir?" Choidar looked at him uncertainly. "The song. Play it again, but this time broadcast it directly at that patrol over there." He pointed to a small group of 4 Devourer ships that were methodically harvesting debris from a destroyed Zentorian cruiser. This time, Choidar did it on purpose. She adjusted her transmission settings and sent the bouncy K-pop melody directly toward the enemy vessels on their primary communication frequency. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The alien ships began flying in completely erratic patterns, their perfect geometric formation breaking down into chaos. One ship started spinning in tight circles, while another began firing its weapons, randomly in all directions. The third ship seemed to be trying to retreat and advance at the same time, jerking back and forth like a confused animal. The fourth ship simply shut down entirely, going dark and drifting away from the group. "Incredible," breathed Dr. Yunji, watching the sensor readings with scientific fascination. Their shared consciousness is being disrupted by the irregular patterns in the music. "Look at this. Their communication network is trying to process and categorize the sound, but it can't find any logical purpose or pattern." Navigator Lee Su was laughing despite their dangerous situation. "We just confused a group of galaxy-conquering aliens with a pop song about dancing and having fun. This is the weirdest day of my life." "The hive mind," Dr. Yunji said suddenly, her eyes wide with understanding. "That's it. Their greatest strength is also their weakness. They share everything through their collective consciousness, including confusion and chaos. When one ship gets confused, they all get confused." Chief Engineer Kim Tae was already pulling up the ship's cultural database, his fingers flying over his controls with renewed energy. "We have thousands of hours of human music, art, literature, and entertainment in our archives. Everything from classical symphonies to comedy shows to abstract art exhibitions. All of it completely irrational by their standards," Hanwoo said grimly, the full implications of their discovery hitting him. "To a logical machine intelligence, human creativity must seem like pure chaos. We create art for beauty, music for emotion, stories for entertainment. None of it serves any practical purpose that they could understand." Park Min was monitoring the enemy fleet's movements on long-range sensors. "Captain, the main swarm is still heading toward the core systems. If we're going to do something, we need to do it soon. They'll reach the inhabited worlds within days." Wu made a decision that would either save the galaxy or get them all killed in the most ridiculous way possible. "Navigator Lee, plot a course for the heart of the main swarm. We're going to give them a taste of human culture they'll never forget." The crew exchanged glances, filled with both terror and excitement. What they were about to attempt had never been tried before in the history of warfare, using chaos itself as a weapon. "Sir, are you sure about this?" Kim Tae asked. "We're talking about flying directly into the middle of thousands of enemy ships. Even if our plan works, we might not survive long enough to see the results." "The way I see it," Han Wu replied, "we're already dead. The entire galaxy is already dead if we don't stop them here. At least this way we go out doing something that's never been done before." As the Iron Dawn began its final approach toward the massive Devourer fleet, the crew prepared for what might be their last mission. The enemy swarm filled the view screen like a dark storm cloud, thousands of organic-looking ships moving in perfect coordination toward their next targets. "Choidar, prepare every piece of human culture in our database for broadcast," Hanwoo ordered. "Music, movies, art, literature, comedy shows, cooking programs, sports commentary, everything." "All of it, sir?" she asked. "All of it. If we're going to confuse them, let's really confuse them." As they flew toward what seemed like certain death, Park Min began her preparations. Soon she would be broadcasting something far more dangerous to a logical hive mind than any weapon ever created. Pure, unfiltered human creativity in all its chaotic, beautiful, completely irrational glory. The Iron Dawn accelerated toward the heart of the enemy fleet, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of every thinking being in the galaxy. They were about to find out if the power of human imagination could overcome the cold logic of mechanical perfection. The battle for the galaxy's soul was about to begin, and the weapons they carried were songs, stories, and the wild, wonderful madness of being human. The main devourer swarm stretched across the void like a living nightmare, thousands upon thousands of ships arranged in perfect geometric formations that hurt to look at. Each vessel pulsed with the same dark rhythm, their collective intelligence coordinating every movement with mechanical precision. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, a testament to pure logical perfection that had already consumed dozens of civilizations. At the center of this massive fleet loomed their primary vessel, a structure so enormous it defied comprehension. The command ship was easily the size of Earth's moon, its surface covered in organic-looking growths that pulsed with veins of dark energy. Smaller ships orbited around it like planets around a star, all connected by invisible streams of data that flowed between them like digital blood. "Dear God," whispered Navigator Li Su as the Iron Dawn approached the outer edge of the formation. "How many ships are we looking at?" "Sensors are detecting over 50,000 individual vessels," reported Chief Engineer Kim Tae, his voice barely steady. "And that's just what we can see. There could be hundreds of thousands more hidden in the formation." Captain Han Wu stood at the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the impossible sight before them. This was it, the moment that would determine whether intelligent life continued to exist in the galaxy or whether everything would be consumed by cold logical perfection. "Broadcasting on all frequencies," reported Communications Officer Choi Da, as the Iron Dawn dove directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. Her voice was steady despite the terror she must have been feeling. She had completely abandoned all military protocols and communication standards, instead preparing to transmit the most chaotic collection of human culture ever assembled. "Remember," Han Wu said quietly, "we're not trying to destroy them with weapons. We're trying to give them something their logical minds can't process. Hit them with everything that makes us human." Choi Da's fingers flew across her control panel as she began the most unusual attack in galactic history. Traditional Korean folk songs mixed with pounding electronic dance music. Ancient Buddhist chants collided with modern rap lyrics. Classical symphonies blended with death metal screams. Comedy shows from 3 different centuries played simultaneously with dramatic operas and children's nursery rhymes. The effect was immediate and shocking. The outer ring of devourer ships, which had been moving in perfect synchronization just moments before, began to waver like flowers in a strong wind. Their precise formations started to break apart as the chaotic data flooded their shared consciousness. "Look at this," Dr. Yoon-ji called out, her eyes glued to her sensor readings. "Their neural activity is spiking off the charts. It's like we're giving them a massive digital headache." On the main screen, they could see individual devourer ships beginning to behave erratically. Some started spinning wildly, their sleek hulls rotating like tops out of control. Others began firing their weapons randomly in all directions, attacking empty space or even their own allies. Several ships simply shut down entirely, their lights going dark as they drifted away from the formation like dead fish. "It's working!" shouted Kim Tae, his voice filled with disbelief and joy. "Their coordination is completely breaking down. They don't know how to handle random information." But even as they celebrated this small victory, Han Wu could see that the swarm was beginning to adapt. The inner ships were starting to modify their communication frequencies, trying to filter out the chaotic transmissions. The hive mind was learning just like it always did. "They're trying to block us," Park Min reported, monitoring the enemy's defensive systems. "They're adapting their communication protocols to screen out our broadcasts." Han Wu knew they had only minutes before. The Devourers found a way to completely shut out their transmissions. Once that happened, the swarm would reorganize and continue its path of destruction across the galaxy. "Dr. Yoon, I need everything we have," he ordered urgently. "Every song, every story, every piece of art, every movie, every book in our databases. All of it, transmitted simultaneously." Dr. Yoon-ji looked up from her station with concern. Captain, that could completely overload our communication systems. The power requirements alone could shut down life support. Better us than the galaxy, Han Wu replied grimly. Do it. The Iron Dawn suddenly became something unprecedented in the history of space warfare, a beacon of pure human culture blazing across the electromagnetic spectrum. The ship's transmitters, pushed far beyond their designed limits, began broadcasting thousands of years of human creativity directly into the devourer hive mind. Classical music from Earth's greatest composers, mixed with heavy metal from underground garage bands, ancient Greek philosophy crashed into modern stand-up comedy routines. Abstract paintings were converted to digital signals and collided with mathematical poetry. Love songs blended with war chants. Children's lullabies merged with horror movie soundtracks. Scientific theories danced with fairy tales. Religious hymns battled with atheist manifestos. The result was catastrophic for the devourers. The hive mind, built entirely on logic and order, simply couldn't process the contradictions. It tried desperately to analyze why humans would create music that served no tactical purpose, art that had no logical meaning, stories that defied rational explanation. Why would a species waste time and resources on things that didn't help them survive or conquer their enemies? Their entire network is crashing, Dr. Yunji reported with amazement. They're trying to categorize and understand everything we're sending them, but human culture doesn't follow logical patterns. They can't make sense of it. On the tactical display, they watched as the impossible happened. Ship by ship, the massive devourer fleet began to shut down. Their perfect formations dissolved into complete chaos as the collective consciousness overloaded. Ships that had moved in harmony for months suddenly became confused and directionless. The primary vessel at the center of the swarm was the first to succumb. The massive command ship, which had been pulsing with dark energy, suddenly went completely dark. Its enormous bulk began drifting silently through space like a dead moon, all signs of life extinguished. "The command ship is down," Kimte shouted. "Whatever was controlling the fleet just shut off." The collapse spread outward like a wave. Thousands of ships that had been perfectly coordinated just minutes before now floated aimlessly through space, their lights dim, their weapons silent. The greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen was dying not from weapons or explosions, but from pure confusion. Within an hour, the entire swarm was silent. 50,000 ships, each one, capable of destroying planets, now drifted through space like abandoned toys. The collective intelligence that had consumed entire civilizations had been defeated by songs about love, poems about flowers, and jokes about daily life. Captain Han Wu stood on the bridge of the Iron Dawn, surrounded by his exhausted crew, watching as the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known simply stopped existing. The silence was deafening after weeks of constant battle alarms and enemy transmissions. "Sir," Park Min said quietly, her voice filled with awe, "we're receiving communications from the surviving galactic fleet. They want to know what happened. How do we explain this?" Han Wu looked around at his crew, these ordinary humans who had accomplished the impossible, using nothing but their chaotic, creative, completely illogical humanity. He smiled for the first time in months. "Tell them we introduced the Devourers to humanity," he said simply. They couldn't handle it. The small exploration ship Iron Dawn, armed with nothing but human unpredictability and the chaotic beauty of human culture, had accomplished what entire armadas of advanced alien civilizations could not. In the end, it wasn't superior firepower or advanced technology that saved the galaxy from extinction. It was the simple, inexplicable, wonderful madness of being human, the ability to create beauty for its own sake, to tell stories that served no purpose except to entertain, to make music that existed only to make people happy. The Devourers, for all their logical perfection, could never understand why humans would waste time on such things, and that misunderstanding had doomed them completely. The end.